I'm going to share the screen. And, okay. Okay, do you see on the screen the false witness, the power of speech? Yeah, you know, if you don't mind, I'm just going to move this back. I'm going to just stop this for a second. I'm sorry. For some reason, when people log on, they're not automatically logged on. I need to admit them to the meeting. I'm going to try to change their setting, but in the meantime, let me share this screen, and then I can have both on. No, I can't. Okay, I lose that. I hope. Oh, okay. I was able to open. Okay, false witness. Do not be a false witness. Recording. Great. Okay. As we will see, the literal meaning of this diber, of this commandment, is actually in court. When one is called to a court of law, and you're called as a witness, you cannot give false witness. I think of the challenge is to see this as a day-to-day, minute-to-minute guideline, core value for life. I don't know how many of us have ever been to court and how many of us have ever been asked to be a witness. It's not something that happens that often. But when we think about it, you know, if you would ask yourself, well, what are the underlying principles that are involved over here? And I think there are actually three that come to mind in a very obvious way. Number one is do not be a false witness in a court means justice. There's a system of justice. There's a court. We're people of justice. Number two is truth. Do not be false. Do not speak falsely. And number three, which is actually the one we are going to focus on, is the power of speech. Our speech is easy, very easy to speak. It's almost not physical. It comes out quickly and is gone. And we might not appreciate its impact and its importance without thinking about it. But when we stop to think about it, it really does play an incredible role and is incredibly impactful on the lives that we live as human beings and the world that we live in. So let's get going. Introduction. Human speech allows us, amongst other things, to collaborate. By the way, that's not sure if you've read Noah Harari's books, but that's one of his theories, is that mankind's ability to dominate the world is through the power of collaboration, and that generally is through speech. Advocate, give comfort, but also to cause pain. We will explore the responsibility that comes with this unique power of speech. So first we are going to focus on human speech as unique. Source 1, Genesis. The Lord God formed man from the dust of the earth. He blew into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living being. The Hebrew is lenefesh chaya. And source 2, Unclis, is the translation. That's the one generally published on the side of the Chumash. And the Lord God created man, dirt from the ground, and he blew into his nostrils a living soul. And it was for a speaking spirit in man, a ruach mamalala. And that translation is into Aramaic. A speaking spirit. So this uniqueness of mankind over the animal world is the ability to speak. And Rashi picks up on this, the nefesh chaya, a living soul. Cattle and beasts were also called living souls. But this one of man is the most alive of them all because he was additionally given intelligence and speech. And the two really go together. Without intelligence, I'm not sure how speech would be that effective, but just having intelligence without a means to communicate it would also not. So the two really go together. We find in classical sources, source number 4, the Tanya, that he divides the world into 4 categories: mineral, vegetable, animal, and medaber, a speaker. So that's how we are unique. What makes you human is your ability to speak. Conversation. In what ways is human speech different from the sounds animals make when communicating? If so, in what ways is human speech unique?
Well, as opposed to animals, I'd say words over just sounds and such. Although I have 2 teenagers and I hear a lot of sounds rather than words sometimes also, but it's another story.
Not wilde gaius. So what do those words? You're right. We have language. I guess it's a language of words. What does that give us? Some extra ability? What is contained in those words?
What I've read that what computers have not been able to do is what babies do, which is they learn a word, but then from that word they extrapolate a whole category of words, a whole category of objects and things. So speech for us is not just like a one-to-one, this is a cup, this is a cup, but we're able to categorize and make, extrapolate from its particular item. We're able to use our speech to create concepts and to go beyond what we see in front of us. So they haven't been able to make computers do that yet. They said, in a computer, everything has to be inputted.
Interesting. Okay. Do you think that's uniquely human? Can the animal pick up on a sound and categorize it and without extrapolate? I guess.
Probably to some extent.
Yeah, it would seem that humans are unique in their ability, in our ability to think abstractly.
Right.
Abstractly to imagine the future, to contemplate the past. We're not always dealing with the here and now. And words is how we communicate that. Okay, why do the commentators feel it is important to include speech as part of the original creation of humanity?
Well, I'm thinking that God created by words, and if man is created, if humans are created in God's image, then we need to create by words as well.
Exactly. Great. Yeah, that's our creative force. And I think from a moral point of view, how do we create a better moral society is through words, through education. And those are concepts. Those are concepts that we pass on. So yeah, for sure. Okay. Actually, I heard a podcast by Rabbi Sachs. I don't know if any of you are Jonathan Sachs fans. And he said that in the Genesis story, there are 3 aspects. There's V'yomer, and speech, V'ya'as, V'yehi, he made, it came about, and then V'yar v'yinei tov, he saw and it was good. And he says those are 3 aspects of creation. One is the conceptualization. That's V'yomer. You got to get the words. You got to have a clear idea of what you want. Number 2, you got to do it, practice. You have to put it into practice. And 3 is the affirmation, that it's good. It needs that. And, I thought maybe that's on a intellectual, practical, and emotional level. And the point being for our subject here is that speech is often the first stage of creativity. Is you have an idea or something, but what is it? Until you can put it into words, it doesn't take form. Okay.
Yeah, speech really lends itself to ideas, which may be another thing that humans have over animals in terms of just concepts, like you said.
Yeah. Okay. How powerful are our words? So let's go on to page number 3. The following texts illustrate a variety of ways in which speech can be powerful. Speech can be emotional, creative, spiritual, and intellectual. So I believe it's this week's Parsha, Parsha's Noah. We have the Tower of Babel. And everyone on earth had the same language and the same words. They were Safa Echad or Devarim Achadim. They said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and burn them hard. Bricks serve them as stone, and the bitumen served them as mortar." And they collaborated. They collaborated in a rebellion, apparently against God. So if they could do such bad through collaboration, how much good can we do through collaboration? Love this one, Rabbi Joseph B. Soloveitchik, the Learning Man of Faith, commenting on Job 32:20. Let me speak then and get relief. Let me open my lips and reply. Dabra v'yirvach li eftach sefata ve'enen. So let me open my, for there's a redemptive quality for an agitated mind in the spoken word, and a tormented soul finds peace in confessing. And I think we all know that from, when you're stuck emotionally, one of the best ways and most effective ways of getting out of that is by speaking, by starting to speak, to communicate. In the text below, the daughters of Tzalafchad use words to advance for themselves, advocate for themselves. So the daughters of Tzalafchad, they stood before Moses, the whole assembly, they said, "Our father died in the wilderness and he has not left sons. Let not our father's name be lost to his family because he had no son. Give us a holding amongst our father's kingsmen." And that's the end of the story, is they got what they advocated for. So,
I think just as critically in how these two quotes are so relevant is the sense by so many people in today's world that they are not being heard. And in the last quote, true enough, they advocated for something, they got something. But think of the power of the Truth and Reconciliation process in South Africa. People were not asking for, they were really asking simply to be heard. And it was so powerful.
Right. Yeah, very great insight. Interesting. It's almost like two levels of one, just to be heard, and then, alavai, you get something, but there's something in the very hearing as well.
And I'm also amazed when people come to me for pastoral counseling issues, and I just let them talk. I listen, like you said, and they're through their words, they speak what they need to do right in front of me. It's something they might want to do, but it's through words they get there.
Right.
So really what it also says is that very many times as powerful as that we need well, in your case, Ken, you would sort of ask permission. Are you asking me for advice, or do you need to listen? But how often do we simply need for someone to lend an ear and not use the power of their voice and to just receive?
Right. Actually, one of the few Kabbalistic ideas I know is that the Arizal said that the first thing God created were ears, because he was about to speak. And if there was no ears, there would be no point to speaking. So that receptive, to be, that's without ears, what's the meaning of speech? That's the whole conversation to itself. Yeah. There's a halachic, just on that point, there's a halachic concept called Shomea Ka'oneh, which means the one who hears is as if he's saying it himself. And we use that when when we make Kiddush, so then the people around the table are listening, and it's as if they are saying it themselves. Everyone needs to say it. And the idea is because speaking becomes speaking because it's heard. So they are part of the speaking process. They are making this into speech, the listeners. So together, everyone's involved in the speech, and that's how it can be considered a answering. Okay.
I was just thinking of, I read this autobiography of Martin Buber recently, and I was just thinking about how he defines divine, which is in the communication between two people. And that's divine. That's where you find God, in that space of communicating. And he talks about someone who came to him and spoke to him about his problems, and the next day this man committed suicide, and he said, he failed him because he wasn't hearing him. He thought he was hearing him, but he wasn't. So it's not, so the speech is just the words, but the understanding and the space in between that and the dialogue is the essence of the speech. It's not just the words. Mm-hmm. So when you said speaking becomes hearing, that's the essence of it. How do you hear?
Right.
How do you hear the words?
And it also makes me think about, actually, Noah, who was quote unquote righteous in his own generation, but he alone, so the point is his silence, he almost gave consent, right? So it was as if he was speaking the corruption as well, because he wasn't objecting to it. He was silent in the face of it. So he was speaking it as well.
Yeah. He was condemned for that, as opposed to Abraham.
It's another perspective on him.
Yeah, fascinating. I guess that's in here. Yeah. That's a Talmudic phrase, by the way, shtika ko'oneh, shtika koheda, sorry. If someone is silent, it means they admit, they agree to what's being said, because if you disagree,
because if they're speaking.
Yeah, speak up. Otherwise, okay, you must be agreeing. Excellent. Okay. This source is an example of intellectual speech, I would say moral. How I love your Torah, it is my speech all day long. And in source 5 is Moses hitting the rock instead of speaking to it. And I think it's one of the Dvar Torahs that I've written about, which I got the most comments back about, what was the big lesson that Moses failed to teach the people? And he failed to teach them the power of speech, right? He had to resort to physically hitting the rock. But why didn't he just speak to it and show that the water could come out through speaking to it? Wow, that would have been, that was a big message. Okay, identify the positive or negative consequence of each text above. We've kind of done that. What lesson about speech would the Israelites have learned if Moses had used speech to bring water from the rock? And I just gave you that. If anyone else wants to give any insight on that. Okay. Let's look at the Peshat, the literal understanding.
I just want to say that I think he also didn't teach them trust, bitachon. By hitting, he not only did he not teach them patience and using speech, but he didn't teach them to trust.
He also he hit the rock before and it worked, and he was kind of stuck in that mode, and he didn't evolve or change. And so he wasn't really. It was kind of a sign that his time, was up as his leader was trying for change. But yeah,
interesting. Just going back to Audrey, that really goes back to the point we were speaking before, in that the physically changing something, it often coerces the subject of change. right? You force it to do what it does. But speaking always requires the work or the acknowledgement, the agreement of the person listening, right? So there again, the ears became as important as the mouth. That together they form this collaboration. Yeah, and maybe going into the land where God was now going to stop doing all these miracles, and they were going to have to work the land and really enter into a partnership with God in a much more, where they would play a much greater role. They needed trust. They needed to trust that by doing what they understood as right, God would eventually, the crops would grow. So yeah, beautiful insight. Okay, let's go into the pshat, the literal understanding. So text, being a false witness. Do not testify against your neighbor as a false witness. Lo taneh b're'echa ed shaker. And then the Rambam says that is in court. And it's interesting, in the second version of the Ten Commandments, in Parshas V'etchanan, in Deuteronomy, it says, Lo tanech b're'echa ed shav. Do not be a worthless witness. And the Chizkuni there says this includes even true testimony, however it's inadmissible in court. For example, the witness saw it, but he was alone. And for some things you need two witnesses. Or the accused was not warned prior to his action, and in which case testimony wouldn't help. And I think that's a real opening to understanding that it's not always about the truth. It's about what the truth does. It's about what your speech does. And I think that's that leads to this being sensitive to the power of speech and what are you trying to achieve through it. We'll get into that more now. Conversation, what is the difference between a false witness and a worthless witness? We just explained. We have already been told that we should not lie. Why do you need a specific warning about being a reliable witness? Right? Stay away from a false matter. Why do you think and I guess we could add to this question, and why would this be in the Ten Commandments, not to be a false witness?
So is this saying that if you know something to be true, but you also know that you haven't fulfilled the legal requirement that you're the only one who saw it, that you don't need to come forward?
I think it's saying even more than that. If you did come forward, you would be transgressing this diber.
Yeah, if you did come forward.
It was almost a strange thing. I don't know how this witness would be called. I don't know how this would take place practically, but I guess the person stands up in court and shouts out, I saw this, I'm testifying. And it's not going to have its intended legal consequence. It's not going to bring to justice. So then don't say it.
But if you don't say it, are you not agreeing that what you saw didn't happen? Relating back to the, silence is consent.
Yeah. Interesting. I don't think so in a court of law. I think in a court of law where it has its parameters and it has its requirements, no. If
you often hear a judge say, somebody said something and then they go strike that from the record, even if it was true, because there's something circumstantial or something that they don't like about it, even if it's true, they'll strike it from the record. So the juries can't consider that. It's very, I guess very technical, but
right.
I
think it does enter into your question, Jill. It's a good question. There seems to be a real balance over here. about when to speak, when not to speak, what to speak, how to speak. It's a delicate tool that we have, and we have to learn to use it wisely. Let's go. Yeah.
I'm just thinking that there's a difference between speech between people and the rules of a court of law. Like, I don't know, Jill, if if in normal discourse, if you hear something or know something and you're the only witness, that you should keep quiet. But if in a court of law, that might be a different level of laws, and rules. What's permissible in a court of law doesn't necessarily translate to how we interact on a not a legal basis, just in terms of our discourse.
Mm-hmm. Well, true enough, you only speak when asked, etc. There's strict rules about that.
Right. Okay. Introduction. You saw the underlying principle. What are the implications of this debate for everyday speech? The Sforno text expands on the prohibition against being a witness in court to everyday speech and breaks it down into two categories: Lashon Hara, disparaging comments which are true, and Motzi Shem Ra, disparaging comments which are false. He saw in this debate the principle of not using speech for negative consequences. The third text talks about rechilut, especially tale-bearing, as it applies to the listener. So the Sforno says over here, included in this diber is Lashon Hara, speaking badly about others, and Motzi Shem Ra, spreading damaging lies about others. What's interesting is that Lashon Hara, by definition, is true. If you lie badly about someone else, that's Motzi Shem Ra. So he saw in the diber, hang on a second, it's saying clearly, do not lie as a witness. And he's taking from that, well, there must be there's a consequence that needs to be achieved in a court of law, and that's only going to come about through telling the truth. But I think whereas that's talking about legal justice, for social justice, the Sforno is saying the laws are it's a little different, and sometimes even speaking the truth might not achieve what we want to achieve socially. The social. Let's see, clause 2 over here. The Talmud says the tongue kills 3: the speaker, the listener, and the one spoken about. Rav Chama, son of Rabbi Chanina, said, which verse alludes to this? Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and they that indulge in it shall eat the fruit thereof. The Chafetz Chaim, in his introduction, Rechilut is specifically tale-bearing. For example, guess what Sarah said about you, even if it isn't disparaging, and it's true again, but causes the hearer to feel negatively about the person. That's a real opening into, okay, this is not just about what I like to say, the court of law, it's also about the court of society, it's about the court of the classroom, it's about the court of the family, the home, it's about the court of the shopping mall. We're speaking all over the place, and each court, I think, has a different rules in a way, and speech gets used kind of differently to achieve the desired outcome in each case. So let's see the conversation. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Does this popular jingle resonate with the conclusions of the text above? Certainly not. How does this apply to bullying? Obviously, right? That's a major issue, and with social media has become even a bigger one. In what ways does the diber apply to the anonymous nature of internet communication? Does that make it any better?
It just makes it easier.
Right.
I think this is so crucial, central to what we're dealing with as a nation right now. I mean, I think this is, everybody's thinking about this. Like, what is acceptable communication? I mean, we just don't seem to have any rules anymore about what civil discourse looks like.
Or what truth looks like.
Or
if
what
we
truth
feel
looks
that it's true.
Yeah. It's just frightening where we're headed with, and the internet makes it so much worse because you can just say these things anonymously.
Yeah, you can alter photos, videos. It's very scary.
Yeah, right. So you even don't have, like, you could, people say, well, show me the evidence.
Right.
You can't even trust that.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we see this all over the news, all over our leadership, just all this backbiting, all this negativity, all this blame. It's just terrible. It's terrible. You can't. It's
Do you think it's filtering down into other areas of that? Meaning, that's politics. That's the court of politics, the court of media, the court of everyday civilian life. Do you think there's been a noticeable change there, the way people speak?
I can't imagine that it doesn't. I can't imagine that the rise of, hate language, hate speech. I can't imagine that it's not just people feeling empowered to say things that one couldn't say, even if one believed it. Not just the United States, but worldwide.
I think the legal system, justice system, is trying to play catch up with what's going on now, because it's such a different world now, with all these factors and things.
Yeah, it's changed dramatically and quickly.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not. That's not a job I would like. Okay. The sources above show sensitivity of the power of speech and how careful we should be with our words. Parts of our society have become very sensitive in this area. Some say that we've gone overboard with political correctness. Do you agree or disagree? So that's on the other side.
I think so. I think everybody, they say everybody's outraged today. Like, everybody feels like you can't say anything. You got to be careful with your words. I mean, you should be careful with your words, but I think there's such a hypersensitivity to.
You think it sounds like a split? Those who are, you can say anything, and those who are, overly cautious. Is that how we are experiencing things?
I think people take. It seems more frequent people take issue with someone's words or how they phrase things now than I remember before. So I think it would naturally cause people to think more about it overall. I mean, some don't, but
So, I think that's a really nice introduction into the next section here, which is Lashon hara lo to'elet. Sometimes saying something negative is actually positive. For example, warning a friend not to do business with a crook. This is called Lashon hara lo to'elet, negative speech for positive consequence. Even so, the Chafetz Chaim cautions us to be careful when doing it. The source one. The Chafetz Chaim cites 7 conditions. It's true. It's bad. You try to first speak to the person yourself, if that would work. You are not going to exaggerate. You have pure intentions for positive purpose. The positive purpose cannot be achieved in another way, and no more harm will come to them, I guess the person you're speaking about, than it should. This from Esther is when Mordechai was sitting at the palace, and Bigtan and Teresh wanted to kill the king, and he learned about it, and he told it to Queen Esther, and that was reported, and end of the story. Obviously that plays a crucial role later on when the king wakes up and he's reading the journal, and he says, well, was Mordechai ever rewarded for this? That's a turning point. So it actually came through Lashon Hara L'To'elet. He spoke very negatively about it. He warned these people. That's a big mitzvah. This is fascinating. The journalist's creed. We should read. You can read through this. Is a journalist in any way not subject to these principles? Right? They should be examples of these principles.
I don't think we see journalism anymore. Certainly not on the TV. I think we see entertainment and other things, but not journalism.
Right. So if we go back to the 7 conditions, which ones are they good at? They know it's true. Not so sure.
They exaggerate.
They really exaggerate and try to make things very dramatic. Is their intent positive? That's a hard one. And the harm that might come from what's being said. They take that into account.
Right. Well, I think it's fascinating this Lashon Hara L'To'elet, that you can't even say anything bad even though it's true. Like that's also Lashon Hara, right?
Yeah, that's the definition. Unless there will be a positive consequence.
Right.
You're saving someone from some damage or something.
Right. So it's not just the speech. You have to think about the effect of the speech.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Have you ever been in a situation where you needed to employ Lashon Hara L'To'elet? Your experience, did all 7 of Rabbi Yisrael Kagan's conditions apply? That's right. Who could say yes? Amazing. That would be a way of living. Recently, it has seemed that there is a free-for-all in politics and reporting. Some say this allows for truthful debate. Others say it's not decent and sets a terrible precedent on society at large. What do you think?
I don't think necessarily that a free-for-all allows for truthful debate. In fact, I would say a free-for-all compromises truthful debate, because to me, a free-for-all says you can speak without discretion. That's a free-for-all.
Mm-hmm.
That's a get out of jail to say anything you want. I'm less thinking about decency and thinking more about truthfulness and the requirement that it be necessary, that there be a good outcome. Well, and a good outcome, what a good outcome for one person is a poor outcome for another person. But is it necessary for the greater good?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think it really goes back to that. If we consider what are we trying to achieve with our words? What is the consequence we're trying to achieve? And that dictates our intent. And are we really there for the greater good? Are we there for in a social setting for helping individuals?
Well, I think that's the question. I think people say things because they do believe that they do believe they're they're doing something for the good, but I don't know if it's the greater good. It's for their good. It's for the good of their point, of their people. Like because we're so fragmented that people aren't thinking about the greater good. They're thinking about their constituents, their people.
Yeah,
So,
I guess I become more skeptical on these days. I think of people speaking too often for their own self-aggrandizement, either them, their groups, instead of just, what happened to the really true exchange of ideas and things, and
right.
listening to their sides instead of like a win-lose thing.
Right. I agree.
Yeah, it's become a fight and a battle, and who can win, rather than what will be truly the best for our greater good. Yeah, fascinating.
So it's really related to communitarianism, which we're losing in this country.
Yeah. And even in the legal system, I mean, it's an adversarial system that we have. It's not necessarily a truth-seeking system. It's you have a prosecuting attorney, a defense attorney. It's one against the other, and which side's going to win.
Yeah, it's I think these things are always a balance. It's hard to on the one hand, there's freedom of speech. We want people to feel able and willing to speak what they think. On the other hand, it's, well, what are you trying to gain by that? And the one cautions and the one allows. And I think in the legal system, how do we achieve legal justice? Maybe with two opposing opinions, out of that comes the truth. But it's when those things go wrong, and maybe it goes back to the intent, that we see these not so good results. Okay. Lashon Hatov. If it is wrong to speak badly about people, is it a mitzvah to speak well about them? What is the power of Lashon Hatov, literally good speech? I think the Jewish conversation, and maybe because most of the halakha deals with Lashon Hara, it's almost a fixation about what you can't say. Don't say that. But what about what you should say? How about turning that around? So do not be a false witness. Well, let's be a true witness. Let's be someone that really uses this power of speech to its maximum positive consequence. So the Talmud says, the sages taught, how does one dance before the bride? I.e., what does one recite while dancing at her wedding? Beit Shammai says, one recites praises of the bride as she is. And Beit Hillel says, one recites a fair and attractive bride. Beit Shammai say to Beit Hillel, in a case where the bride was clearly unattractive, does one say with regard to her a fair and attractive bride? The Torah states, keep yourself from a false matter. Beit Hillel said to Beit Shammai, according to your statement, with regard to one who acquires an inferior acquisition from the market, should one praise it and enhance its value in his eyes, or condemn it and diminish its value in his eyes? Surely you must say that he should praise it and enhance its value in his eyes and refrain from causing him anguish. From here, the sages said a person's disposition should always be empathetic with others and treat everyone courteously. In this case, too, once the groom has married his bride, one praises her as being fair and attractive. Source 2. And Jacob, after Jacob died, the brothers feared Joseph's retribution. He said to them, so now do not fear, I will sustain you and your small children. And he comforted them and spoke to their hearts. We're speaking to someone's heart. Source 3. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had 5 students. Rabbi Eliezer ben Hokanus, Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya, Rabbi Yossi the priest, Rabbi Shimon ben Natanel, and Rabbi Eliezer ben Arak. Feels like we're back in the Haggadah. He would recount their praises. Rabbi Eliezer ben Hokanus is a pit covered in plaster and does not lose a drop. Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya happy is the one who gave birth to him. Rabbi Yossi, the priest, is pious. Rabbi Shimon Naphtali fears sin, and Rabbi Elazar ben Arak is an ever strengthening fountain. So, which of the above texts is an example of reassuring speech? Which do you see as an example of comforting speech? Which shows the inspirational power of words? I imagine that's in our in order. Praising, affirming, someone who acquires something, someone gets into a relationship. Affirmation is critical often. Right? We live with how we our opinions are very much formed by how others are looking at things as well. This second source is very interesting because the brothers actually lied to him. The brothers came to Joseph, and say, before Jacob, our father, died, he requested that you should be good to us, and he never did. It was a lie. They were so fearful that they lied, and he understood, and he might have even understood that, yet comforted them. What effect do you think Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai's words had on his students?
I think, that Rosenthal effect, that if you believe that somebody is going to do good, then they will. So they did that study with children, and they said to the teacher this was a gifted class, and they weren't a gifted class, but they told the teacher this was a gifted class, and the students all did much better because the teacher believed that these were gifted students. Mm. So, what we say and the legacy we give and the blessings we give and it affects people. I think as a teacher, you every once in a while get, a student that comes back and says, you said something, or you told me I would do great things, or you believed in me, and you just changed the course of my life, or you made such an impact on me. It's rare that you get those things, but you can sometimes hear that. So, these blessings that he said, these are all, I guess, praises, right?
Yeah.
Of course, they're very specific praises. Like, he seems to have known them pretty well.
But also,
the only one that's not specific is happy as the one who gave birth to it.
That's what right. I was going to say.
That's very interesting. What would you? And maybe
nice
he
guy.
Maybe he was an all-rounder. Maybe maybe he generally was.
But is it better to give a specific praise or a general praise? Like, you're going to be a really great musician. Maybe they want to be a scientist. Like, is it better to, if you or to say you can do whatever you want, or you have great skills, or
the Talmud says when we say blessings to God, the more specific the better. That's why we say on the wine, Borei Pragofen, rather than. So that's really interesting. In a way, if you get it right, I think it's much more powerful, right?
Yeah.
If your kid is a musician and they're going for that, well, you don't want to say, well, you could do whatever you want. Like, hang on a second, I'm going for music. Like, praise me in music. But on the other hand, if you get it wrong, it might be confining.
Right.
That's interesting. It's true. The more I think about it, it's really a balance. I think the Talmud says we have two lips in order and teeth to keep our tongue behind bars, right? But maybe there are pairs. There's an upper lip and a bottom lip. There's an upper teeth and it's always a balance. We always think there's a real balance in the words that we use. Okay. How often do you think about how your words affect others? Interesting. I think much more about how other people's words affect me.
Yes.
I think about it a lot because in my gut, I am a very judgmental, sarcastic person. Very sarcastic. It's my
I don't
happy
believe
place.
that, Jill.
I'm sure you know, I mean, and so those who know me well, I say something that sounds funny, but it's really true. 40% of the time I'm biting my tongue, 40% of the time I'm wishing I had, and 20% of the time I'm pretty smart. You know, those are not great numbers. And I have been confronted, and I think about it all the time, like, whoa, stop, that would be very funny. That would be a very funny thing, but someone's going to go down. And so I think about it a lot. I haven't got it down yet, but I think about it a lot.
It's interesting because, you know, my role as rabbi and roles as rabbi, husband, parent, I think quite a lot about the words I use. So maybe that's why I spend some time, you know, my guilty pleasure, watching reality TV, watching people who don't seem to care at all what comes out of their mouth, because it makes for good television. So it's the balance, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do. You know, Ken, I used to be a pastoral rabbi, and
yeah.
I really think that, and now as a teacher, less so, but, you know, definitely students, people do come to the rabbi, to the teacher, for words of inspiration or words of insight. And they're not looking, you know, we can speak regularly and be, you know, the frame, but they really, the words we use are very significant.
Yes.
You know, it's almost what people are expecting. That's what they're coming for. They're coming for words. They're not coming for treatment. They're not coming for, or sometimes they're coming for an ear, which is also very nice. But I think that's really that ability to be able, in almost any situation and circumstance, to lend some words of inspiration or enlightenment or upliftment, you know, to be the voice of morality, of reason, of the better path, is what they're looking for. I haven't found that so much with my children, by the way.
But it's hard. I mean, I have a Tuesday study group, and, you know, inevitably someone will try to take things in a political direction, and it's usually in a very angry, you know, way. And I just, you know, I'm the rabbi of everybody, and people, you know, have their own political, you know, views and ideologies and things, and it's doesn't seem uplifting to me. So I get it back to, you know, what we're talking about. In this case, yesterday we talked about Jewish ethics and values, and it's hard. It's harder these days because we are so fragmented, or too fragmented.
Do you have to be sort of a role model for?
Well, it so happens that I don't do politics. And my Rosh Hashanah sermon was, you know, started off with the fact that I don't do politics. And it's to the point now where in a group, if someone does go political, someone else will say, don't do politics. And I take that as a compliment that I'm there. And it's because once you get pulled into that energy, it's a world of separation. It's not a world of, it's not the Shema world anymore. It's the, let's push each other to the side. Mm-hmm. And but it's hard. It's hard. And yeah, with my teenagers and stuff, 18-year-old son, whatever, it's, you know, you never know what he's going to come up with. And, you know, yes, you got to choose your words carefully.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also to know, you know, you saying that, I'm thinking about my kids and how often I say things and they really take them in the wrong way. You know, it's taken, that's not what I meant. It's not, and I guess there's some work for us, for me, to think more about, well, who am I speaking to? How are they, you know, think even, how are they going to understand what I'm about to say?
Right.
I guess it was a big message.
And it's not just words. I think it's also tone, nuance. We have, you know, as humans, with the power of speech that comes with it.
I have this Israeli friend who said to me, somebody said to her, she said, how do you like this? They said, how could someone like you, how did you get such gorgeous grandchildren? And she said, the chutzpah, how, somebody so ugly like me gets such gorgeous. I said, no, that's an idiom. Like people say things. They weren't saying that you're so ugly. How did you get such gorgeous grandchildren? It was like, but sometimes people just, it was lost on her because she's not an English speaker, so a native speaker. So she didn't get the idiom. But yeah, you have to be careful, but it's hard. I come from Brooklyn, and in Brooklyn, we say what we think, and that's not acceptable in other places in the country.
Yeah. And on the other hand, I'll have my sister, who's much more conservative than I, and she says, "It's Jill, I'm just tired of, you can't say anything anymore. You can't call people by their gender. You can't, if I say African American, they want to be called da 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 da." Yeah. It's very hard, and people can take that a little too far. It's hard work.
Yeah. I think the pendulum has swung a little bit to that side of just being so hypersensitive to everything.
Okay. I'm trying to keep it to an hour. So integration. What does this DBAR mean to you as a core value? Right. So I think, and to me, I think in terms of sharing this, teaching this, facilitating conversations with it, to me, this really opens up what the 10 Commandments are. Whereas we started off with "do not be a false witness." It's like you picture a guy going to court and being called for that. Okay, yeah, I get it. And then opening up this whole power of speech and the role and the power it has in our lives. So what does it mean to you?
We should be teaching this in every classroom, this DBAR. Well, all of them, but this one specifically, we should be teaching to our children. I'm not sure that they hear this anyplace else.
I think such a big part of Jewish texts and everything are dealing with consequences, and I think there are consequences to the words that come out of our mouth. And we don't always, like you said, think about that.
Nice, taking responsibility for that.
To me, it's sort of a lesson. Before something comes out of the mouth, consider, does it need to be said? Does it need to be said here? Does it need to be said to this person? Just stopping, I guess, just stopping. Shtika.
Yeah, it's I've been involved in this for some years now, and what I find quite challenging is actually the next question. What are the challenges you will face? Is trying to become sensitive to your words in an environment where no one is infuriating. There you are trying to be quiet, and everyone's like just going for it, and it's hard. It's a tough one to take that at a higher level. Any other challenges?
Well, they scientifically, like gossip serves a social function. So people like gossip because it's a power tool. So it gives you have inside information that you share with somebody, and so that gives you a certain sense of power. You can say, don't tell anyone. That gives you sense of camaraderie and exclusivity. And so there's all these social functions that language and bad language, so how do you do those things how do you get intimacy and trust and all those things that bad speech does for us? How do you do that without succumbing to Lashon Hara, because there's social function to gossip.
Interesting. Yeah, it touches on intimacy. You're sharing something.
Yeah, I mean, it's a powerful tool. when you say, I know something, you know, don't tell anyone, but I'm going to tell you something about your colleague, or, you know, but I trust you, so don't tell anyone. I mean, that gives you intimacy, power, all those things. So if you want those things, how do you do it in a way that doesn't transgress all
I'm
of it?
having a thought now, actually, is that, you know, the sharing the weaknesses of others, you know, and maybe where we can achieve it, but we don't want to, is sharing our own weaknesses. You know, when you open up to someone else about your own, that's often a very intimate conversation. You know, we don't like, for obvious reason, we don't go around, you know, telling everyone what our fears are, what our.
We didn't talk about that, but do these things also relate to yourself? Like speaking disparagingly about yourself, or saying untrue things about yourself?
There's a well-known story about the Chafetz Chaim who had this question: can you speak Lashon Hara about yourself? And he was on a train and he was sitting next to a guy who didn't know who he was. And they got onto the conversation of the Chafetz Chaim. And he said, he's a no-goodnik. And the guy next to him punched him in the nose. So he said, okay, I learned my lesson. You're not allowed to say it. So, you know, that's interesting. I don't think people speak badly about themselves for negative consequence. You know, we innately want the best for ourselves. Is often, you know, love your neighbors yourself. You want the best for yourself. So when you do share something negative about yourself, it's normally for some, you know, there's some, you want to be helped, or you want to relate to people, or, you know, I do think it's, yeah, I think it's also made complicated by social media and people posting only the best, right?
Yeah, right.
Like, and then when someone does post bad things, boy, it's bad. It's like, you know, it's just not the place to do it. This is an intimate conversation with someone who you can confide in, who you can get guidance from, who can, yeah.
I'm going to jump off. I have to.
Okay. No, we're going to stop here. We've got some everyday things. Keep a log. The conversation, speak deliberately and intentionally once a day. And compare one news story as reported by different news sources, etc. Look through the supplementals. Have a beautiful week, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ken, are you teaching this?
I actually did the introduction with our 8th, 9th, 10th graders.
You're teaching it to kids.
And it's actually, I think it was a smaller group, unfortunately, but I think it worked well. And I'm really tempted actually to get the adult version and try it out with our Tuesday group.
Yeah, this is the adult version.
Yeah.
Almost identical to the teen one.
Yeah, it very much so. Yeah.
Great.
Okay.
All right,
everyone. Thank you.
Yeah,
Have a great week.
You too.
Bye.
All right.